I'm going to get myself out of the way. I get the pleasure of actually introducing this lady. It feels really good just to have her on here with us once again as she closes out the end of this month. It has been a joy having her, hearing her stories, how she tells her stories. Let me just say this: if you haven't learned one thing, storytelling, you can go back and listen just to how she tells the stories. That is definitely, you can tell from a successful leader just in how they present themselves and just telling that story. So she has been with us all month. Once again, she hails from out of Northern California, being one of our great leaders here. Her and her husband have multiple business. She teaches, she mentors many people. Just think about her being one of your mentors. Wow. So she trains in front of thousands of people, in person and virtually. As a matter of fact, I think she just did Lake Tahoe. So yeah, have you seen her there? She reached one of the top positions in our company, I think in 3 years, with a less than 3 years. She'll correct me, trust me if I'm wrong with that. She has one of the brightest energies that you will want to be around, and she's just taking some time to pour into us, and I thank you very much for it. If you can put your hands together for Miss RVP Keri Roeder.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison Mills. Good morning, everybody. That was an excellent edification. Good job. That was great. You followed the template. Very, very good. Very proud of you. Well, happy Memorial Day. Thank you for doing that, because that's actually what I was going to do. So I appreciate you doing that. And I know all of us appreciate our freedoms and appreciate, again, those who are have served and currently serving. Whether it be military, whether it be local law enforcement, ambulance, hospital, all that, our freedoms, our safety, our health, that's not to be taken for granted. So thank you for all those who have served and are serving. And thank you for doing that, Mr. Mills. That's awesome. So happy Memorial Day. I was curious how many people would jump on this morning. So for those of you who are new, welcome. Congratulations, you made an excellent decision to add ACN to your portfolio of income, right? Whether you're doing this for super part-time supplemental income, or you decided to do this to replace your current income, or to, pay for something significant like college or, retirement or something. Congratulations, you definitely found it. It does take time. It takes consistent effort over a long enough period of time. But by doing that, by following the system that Mr. Al Thomas obviously not only has mastered, but he's actually kind of helped create the system. He's been so successful, not just in ACN, but national, or in all of direct sales. And part of that is recruiting and finding leaders like Mr. Mills here, who's doing a phenomenal job of building the business and being coachable, and building income, not just for himself, but helping other people. So again, excellent edification. Good job. And I appreciate that. That was very, very kind of you. Okay, so as you said, I've been storytelling this month, and this is our final Monday together for May, and I'm gonna kind of wrap up my storytelling with what I did to get started, okay, in the first really 60 days or less. So for those of you who weren't on the other calls, they are recorded, as he said, and you can go back and listen to them, because through my storytelling, what I realized when I started really looking at ACN as a leadership business, I started to realize all of the things that my original mentor, Mrs. Renee Wagner, all the stuff she did, that she was, leading me to finding my success in ACN. And so that's why I'm telling the story, because it wasn't what I was doing. The last 3 times that we've talked, it was what she did in order to be able to create the value for me in order to see, adding ACN on top of my very, very crazy schedule. Okay, so we left off that I had gone home, right? And said to my husband, well, we're gonna be rich or whatever. And so then, or whatever, I showed him the presentation. He said it doesn't make sense. He left. right? I had my first presentation that Tuesday night, and he came out and he's like, well, that makes perfect sense. So that's where we left off last week. So I want to share with you, I did not have the fastest start. Okay. A lot of you know Mrs. Jocelyn Driscoll, and a lot of you know that whenever she and I have the opportunity to talk at the same time on stage and training and stuff, I always ask to go first because she's always like, oh, I tease her, but I do in a funny little voice, like, oh, I made thousands of dollars in the first 30 days, right? Yeah, I didn't. So that's why I always want to go first. Good news is we did hit regional vice president in 3.5 years. So if you're on this call and you didn't have the fastest start, cool, no worries. You get to start now and have the fastest start, because I'll tell you my kind of new starting point. And if you are new on this call, you want to follow Mrs. Driscoll's lead and have be super coachable out of the gate and make a ton of money. Okay, so we always ask everybody when we get started, right, to make a list of everybody you know. Don't prejudge, right? You've all heard that. And you heard the story about how my husband and I were prejudged. Well, here's what's interesting is the other day I was going through my file cabinet and I found this folder, and it says invite list. And I was like, oh, so it's my original invite list, which is crazy. So to have all of this stuff. So my original list, okay. So remember I told you I had that AM presentation, right? So here's my AM presentation. May 13th, 2010. I had I must have rewrote this to my yeses. So I had 5 people who were coming, and I told you 2 showed, right? I think they only came for the food. And then I had my PM list, and then I have multiple, there's my yeses. So I have multiple PBRs on here. Oh, that's what they were called. Multiple PBRs on here, and they're yeses. But I wanted to show you my original list. Okay, you know how we say write it out in a column so you can make notes? Yeah, this is why, because it's maddening to know what I was doing here. Okay, but I added this up. It's double-sided. I added it up, and there's literally like 98 names on here. Okay. But remember, we say don't prejudge. So let me tell you about some of these names. One of my best friends, she was living in, her and her husband, 3 kids, right? Living in poverty, basically. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to get out of that situation. She declined. Cool, no worries. Okay. Other people on here in that same similar situation. But then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down is my doctor. They say don't prejudge. My doctor, clearly successful, right? Clearly doesn't need the money, but they said don't prejudge and write everybody's names down. So I actually invited my physician since 1979. He'd been to my wedding, the whole bit. So he lovingly declined. Cool, no worries. That's not on me. Okay, it's just I have to offer. Okay, there's some people on here who are extremely wealthy. That we knew from our traditional businesses. There are people on here that I don't really know. So one says Anita next door. I don't even know who that is anymore. So, but she lived in our cul-de-sac. So I wrote everybody in our cul-de-sacs names down that I met at some point. People from other states, my mortgage broker, again, all these, some ex-coworkers. Oh, another woman who's super, super wealthy. But she did a networking, she did a direct sales, I forget what hers was, but I was like, oh, cool, maybe she'll see the value in that in ACN, right? Yeah, so I just went through, oh, another name that her and her father own like land that owns like half of our community, which is crazy. And he's like, again, worth billions. And but I wrote her name down. And so as I go through this list, I'm giggling because, oh, a buddy of mine from high school, super, super successful in the finance. So I'm sharing this with you because this is the list where we don't prejudge, we offer it. However, here's what I did wrong. So I made my little list, okay? And remember I told you that when I was inviting all the kindergarten moms and I was doing little like mini presentation. So I called all these people, 98 of them, and I invited them incorrectly. Yep, shame on me. I invited them incorrectly. So guess what? They were not interested. Okay, because again, they were hearing about ACN through the lens in which they view me versus what ACN actually is. So I ended up having, I got a few business partners out of it, okay, out of my starts, and I'll tell you that in a second, but I'm going to kind of skip ahead and then I'll come back. So once I started going to trainings, and once I went to an international training, June 2010, Cleveland, so crazy, we're coming up on 14 years on that. But when I came back from there, here's what I did. I went back and I rewrote my list, but I did it on the computer. Can't really see it. I did it on the computer, okay? And what I did was I left room for notes, okay? And I called all the people who I had invited, but I messed up the invitation and they never came to see it. And you can see there's no, relay for life, huh? No, we'll try. No, voicemail. So here's what I did though. Whether I got a hold of them or not, because again, this is a long time ago, so we actually left voicemails. Whether I got a hold of them or not, I said something along the lines of this. I kind of just accidentally came up with this. I called it my apology script, okay? So if you've done this, you are welcome to use my apology script. So like my buddy Packard from high school, I got a hold of him and I said, I was just organically me, okay? I was like, dude, I owe you an apology. He's like, what? I owe you an apology. He's like, why? Because I said, I owe you an apology, and I stopped. Moment of pause, right? Like when you have silence, silence is power, okay? So when you say something like that to somebody, I owe you an apology, and they have no idea where it's coming from, they're gonna inquire, they're gonna ask you. So I was like, dude, I owe you an apology. He's like, why? I'm like, seriously, I apologize, I owe you an apology. He's like, why? What's going on? What to do, basically, right? And I said, listen, remember last month when I called you about that ACN business? He goes, oh yeah. I go, dude, I blew it. I said, I blew it for you. I am so sorry. I said something like, I apologize because I explained it to you and you didn't get to see ACN the way that I got to see ACN so that you could make your own independent decision whether or not it was a good fit for you. And so when I said that to everybody or on a voicemail, basically what would end up happening is I would invite them to say, hey, listen, I'm holding another presentation. I would love for you to come to my home, whatever night, day and time, and come and see ACN the way you're supposed to see it. Like do me that favor and come and see it the way you're supposed to see it. And here's what ended up happening. No, right? They all still stayed with their no, thank you. But here's what I ended up doing. I ended up saying something along the lines of, okay, cool. Listen, I want you to understand that I'm going to do this and I'm going to be massively successful. So whether you do or do not do this with me, whether you do or do not see it, I'm apologizing because I blew it, but hear me clearly. When I am successful, don't come back on me and say to me, you never gave me a chance to take a look at it, because I'm giving you a chance now. I blew it. I totally blew it. You can come to my house Monday night, 6 o'clock, whatever the date and time was, and see it again, see it for yourself and decide for yourself. But if not, that's cool. But just hear me clearly that I will be successful and you cannot come back on me and say that I never gave you an opportunity. And every single one of them said, okay, cool. Right? Some came to see it, most did not. But here's the thing. I cleared my conscience. I absolutely cleared my conscience because I went back through my entire list and did that. Now, if you look at, I should have counted the pages. If you look at my list here, so there's obviously then I added more names, right? Coming back out of Cleveland. I added a ton more names. And then I left pages in the end. Gosh, if you could like see all my stuff here. I mean, look at my crazy notes. I was adding names, right? So then printed out another piece of paper with just some blank things I could fill names and phone numbers in and stuff like that, right? Look at all those no's. Like seriously, look at all those no's, maybe. maybe means you didn't write them well. Okay. But like, if you really look through all of my notes here and all of my voicemails and all that, I mean, it's fascinating how many people we have to go through. So then what ended up happening is I had more presentations. Anyway, handwritten list. And then, okay, so let me go back. So we have to go through the many to find the few. Okay. And when we don't prejudge, we just invite everybody we know, we let them decide. Now, the other thing, and I've been invited back for July. So in July, I'm going to talk to you about my personal customer acquisition and the importance of making sure you have enough customers to maximize your income. Okay. But what ended up happening for me, the mistake I made, which is it's funny because as leaders, when we make mistakes, when we fail forward, when we learn from them, we can teach how to do it better. Okay. So I teach all the time that when somebody says no, thank you to making money with you, that is when you immediately follow through and get them as a customer because they know why you're doing this. They know the credibility of your company. They know all the services you offer because they saw the presentation, right? And you have their attention. See, I had to go back, and I'll tell you that story in July, but I had to go back and recall all of these people. And when you hear that story, that's, yeah. Anyway, okay, so we got our first couple of business partners, okay, and some of you have heard this training. My very first business partner, Mark, okay, he got started, and then I went to a Saturday training all by myself, and I was like, I sat in the back, right? I'm not shy, but for whatever reason, like I didn't know anybody, and I'm all, this is kind of weird. So I kind of sat in the back by myself, but I'm studious, so I brought a notebook and pen, and information was phenomenal. And then I called Mark and I was like, dude, like you need to come with me to training next Saturday. I don't care what you're doing, clear your calendar. So he came with me. And then we sat there, and I put us towards the front row as close as I could get to the front row. And he's not studious. And so we grew up together. And so we're sitting there and I'm listening and I'm taking notes again. And I'm realizing, wow, they're repeating themselves. They said this last week. And Mark leans over to me and goes, dude, we're going to be rich. I'm like, shh, listen, like, pay attention. And so then we got a few more business partners. And so one of them was my ex-coworker, Chandra. And so I said to her, hey, listen, Saturday morning training, like, don't care what you're doing, cancel your schedule. Like, you got to come with us. I'll pick you up, right? By the way, if you pick people up, they're kind of prisoner in your car, okay? So I would pick people up in my big SUV. So now it's my third training. And I'm sitting there and taking notes. And so now I'm Mark on one side, Chandra on the other side, and I'm realizing, they're really repeating themselves. And so Mark leans over and says, hey, they said that last week. I was like, shh, pay attention, right? Chandra leans over and goes, dude, we're going to be rich. I'm like, I know, right? This is so awesome. But what I realized in that moment was Saturday morning training had two purposes. One, the newest person, it was the first time they were hearing it, okay? So it was designed to motivate them. It was designed to equip them, to give them all the tools and trainings that they needed. And then I also realized it's for people like me, people like you, who want to be a leader. When we say the same thing over and over again, you can adopt that information, okay? And eventually in time, when you're being offered an opportunity to be a trainer, you know, if you've been listening and you've been hearing the same thing over and over again, then you're able to train the ACN system the way your leadership wants you to train. Okay, so we got a whole bunch of more people started. By the way, I did get a kindergarten parent or set of parents started. That was fun. But what ended up happening is I realized that in order for this to happen for me, I needed to recruit and get as many people of my own started and then find out who they knew. But again, I didn't have the fastest start. And so coming home on a Tuesday, so back then, pre-COVID, we would have the BOMs on Tuesdays and a Saturday training every Saturday, okay? And I was coming home on a Tuesday, and it was beginning of June. And, you know, they were doing the slides, and I saw the money for what's now the regional director position, but back then it was a team coordinator. And it was a different structure in how they paid out bonuses. Anyway, so when the slide was up there, I saw that and I went, okay, that's the position that I need in order to really justify doing this part-time around my family. So, for those of you who didn't know, don't know, when I got started, both my husband and I were working 7 days a week because we had to keep our corporation going so we can continue to pay our mortgage, right? And feed our 5-year-old daughter. And so I was also, at the time, I was on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce, not anymore. But I also chaired an ambassador team, which is 4 or 5 extra hours I did for volunteer for the business community. I belonged to a service club to spend time with my dad, and I actually volunteered in my daughter's classroom every morning, and I was the room mom, so I got to host all the parties. So I was really busy. I really didn't have time to add ACN on top. Well, guess what? When you want something bad enough, you find the time. Okay. So I was kind of poking away at this, and I was driving home on a Tuesday, and I called Mrs. Renee Wagner, and who lives a few hours from me, and she answered, and I said, "Hi, that's Keri Roeder from Auburn. I don't know if you remember me, Michael's cousin." She said, "Of course I remember you." I said, "Oh, great." I say, "Hey, listen, I'm driving home from Sacramento, and that team coordinator thing, I need that team coordinator thing in order to really, justify doing this for my family." And she goes, she goes, "Let me ask you a question." I said, "Okay." She said, "Will you be coachable?" I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." I said, "I was athlete, totally get it. You need a coach. Yep, I'll be coachable." Because I hadn't been coachable up to this point, apparently. So she said, "Okay." She said, "Let me ask you another question." I said, "Okay, shoot." She goes, "Okay." She goes, "Will you be coachable?" We didn't really know each other at this point, right? And I'm like, "Yeah, you just asked me that." But I said, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll be coachable." She goes, "Okay." She said, "So where you're coming home from the BOM?" I said, "Mhm." I said, "That team coordinator thing, that's what I need." She said, "Okay." She goes, "Let me ask you another question." I said, "Okay." She said, "Will you be coachable?" And she ended up asking me 4 times if I would be coachable. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm driving home. It's like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. I'm all, lady, yeah, I told you to be coachable. Come on, tell me what to do." So she says, she goes, "I need you to come to Cleveland with us." And I said, "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah." Yeah. They mentioned that. Yeah, no. Do you mean Michael's cousin from Auburn? 4 businesses, 7 days a week. I really don't have time to do this. Like, I go, "That's 10 days. I can't go to." And so I'm hammering on, right? She, in silence, because again, silence is power. So when I was done rambling, she quietly says, "You called me." And honestly, I had no response to that because she sat there in silence again. And I was like, "Huh, okay." So the next morning, I, volunteer my daughter's classroom. I go to our office, and I'm in my office, and my husband, he owned 3 construction companies, right? And so he was always just in and out and da da da. And so I'm at my desk, and where he walks in is right here. And so I'm at my desk, and I'm online, and I'm on the phone with my headset with Southwest because I'm trying to find a flight from Sacramento to Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, mind you, I didn't travel much before ACN, but I never traveled by myself. Okay, and so I'm on the phone and with Southwest, and I'm looking. She's like, "There's nothing out of SAC." I go, "Look at Reno, look at San Jose, look at San Francisco," and she goes, "What about Oakland?" And she looks up Oakland. Okay, please don't take offense to this, but I'm like, "Oh my god, I got to go Oakland by myself," right? And so she's like, "That is the last flight out of Northern California on the day you need to Cleveland, Ohio." And so I'm like, "Book it." And at the same time I say that, my husband comes walking in, and I look at him. He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, right. So I give her my credit card. She books the last flight out of Northern California to Cleveland, Ohio for that Thursday or whatever day I was flying. And so 9 days. Okay. And I get off the phone. My husband goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "The ACN thing." I go, "I'm in Cleveland." And he goes, "You're going where?" What? And so this story is a big story. So I don't have time to tell you that story. But ultimately, I went to Cleveland. I went to the international training event, and I experienced ACN for the very first time. See, in our local events, we do our best to create the environment. Zoom, it's not working, people, in the idea that you can't feel other people. Okay. ACN is a personal development program with a compensation plan attached, but it's also a people business. Okay. And so when I went back then, we had 25,000 people filling arenas. Okay. When I experienced ACN is when I came home. I made a decision in June 2010 in Cleveland, Ohio, that this is what I was going to do to take care of my family. And that's when I went back and I made those phone calls and I apologized to people and I gave them another opportunity. And that's when I went hyper focus. What do I need to do? And along those lines, that's when I ended up meeting Mr. Thomas, and some of you heard that story with my husband and he and all of that. But what ended up happening is every time so we were making like massive progress, okay? But what I kept realizing is I know, yes, we are going to go back to that. I know more people. And so I held myself responsible to continue to invite my own people and have my own events. So I ended up having more events. And this is a list of all new people. All new people. And then I'd be out in the community and I'd get business cards, right? I would invite those people because they're business owners. I ended up having more presentations and more new people because that's what it takes. I told you, I would tell you, oh, what's your husband running on? What's my husband start participating? Anyway, because my husband knows people that I don't know. Okay. But that's what it takes, right? Like it takes having more, can't see that one, having more presentations. I mean, look at this list. Oh, this was my customer list, I think. Yep. I mean, oh, these are all businesses. Look at that. So it takes, look at that one, 2013. Good. I'd already been in ACN for 2.5 years. Can't see this one. January 8th, 2013. So that's what it takes, honestly, is we have to go through the many to find the few. Oh, look at that. October 7th, 2013. A whole list of people that I invited to when we were doing executive lunches. So that's what it takes, honestly. Go through everybody you know. Don't prejudge. If I could give you any tip from my experience, it would be do it faster than I did. Like, don't prejudge. I wasn't prejudging anybody, but I wasn't going through everybody. I wasn't exhausting my brain to know everybody that I should invite. Okay. Back then I really didn't have very many people on my cell phone. Now I have a bunch. But when you invite correctly and you put people in front of people like Mr. Mills, Mr. Clemens, Mr. Thomas, all the regional directors and regional vice presidents on these training calls, when you put people in front of the opportunity, they get to decide for themselves. But inviting is a whole nother topic. And I know everybody's been trained on that. But when you invite properly and people can decide for themselves, when you do it in groups, when you do it it's more efficient. And that's what busy people want to know is, can I actually do this part-time around my schedule? If you remember the beginning of my story, I didn't go to the presentation that I was invited to, right? But when I drove down my parents' long driveway and I could see all those cars, I'm like, there's so many cars here. Okay. So even though I didn't experience ACN in a group format, I knew they were in a group format. And that's why when she said, I will drive back up, put people in your living room, groups of people. And so we have to go through the many to find the few, because we don't know who's going to say yes. We don't know who's going to say maybe later. We don't know who's going to say no, thank you. And we can turn around and capture them as customers. So obviously there's more detail to my first start. But my first 40 days, I had like 5 or 6 business partners. I mean, which is fine. But when I came back from Cleveland and I made that decision, that is when I ran. I ended up hitting that team coordinator position, okay, which is today's regional director. And by the way, it was harder. It really was harder. Okay, we did walk up the hill in the snow with no shoes. Okay, it really was harder to hit that position. I ended up doing it in 7 months from when I decided to do it, which was Cleveland. So it took me 8.5 months on the books, but it took me 7 months start to finish when I made that decision. I hit team coordinator at the end of January. I had 2 days left at the end of January. And back then you had to have 5 people started and qualified in order for you to get a bonus. Okay, telling you, it's harder, much better compensation plan. It was great, however, but you needed 5. We had so much momentum when we hit team coordinator that in those 2 days, we had more than our 5. They all qualified. I got a bonus as a team coordinator as a result of those 2 days. I was a team coordinator for 11 months of 2011. We had so much momentum. We were in the top 50 in the entire company. And there had been thousands of team coordinators, tens of thousands of team coordinators ahead of me, right? But we ended up being in the top 50, and in 2012 got to go on a leadership event to New Orleans. And then a calendar year later, we hit the regional director position. And then, like I said, in 3.5 years, the entire team hit regional vice president. So you can have a faster start than I did. You can have the kind of start that Mrs. Driscoll had. Again, if you're new, do the faster start. If you are not new, then you can do what I did, which is make a decision. And after making that decision, make your list, invite everybody, don't prejudge, put them in front of the leaders so that your contacts can decide for themselves. Always be adding. At the beginning of this, beginning of the month, I would told you, I would tell you how Mrs. Renata Krumer, Mr. Al Thomas, all the top producers, how it is they are still top producers because they're always adding to their list. They're always inviting, they're always peaking, we're always getting new people started. So hopefully that this month of storytelling on my start is helpful. Like I said, Mr. Thomas texted me this morning and asked me to come back in July. So what I'm going to do in July is share with you my customer acquisition stuff. Okay. Because again, I started with 2 positions that we had to fill customers for. Now we have 3. So I will share with you kind of my journey in customer acquisition and how and who and where I'm able to get still to this day continue to get a ton of customers from. So I appreciate you all jumping on. Happy Memorial Day. Please be safe, right? Be safe as you're out there celebrating and honoring and remembering those who have fallen. But I appreciate all of you being on. Mr. Mills, thank you for your kind introduction. Mr. Thomas, when you see this recording, love you. Roeder says hi, and we'll see you in July.